All right, guys, enough of that epic intro music. My wife actually is going to kill me probably when she sees that I did that. But hey, guys, you know what? Today we're here to do some training, but we're also here to have some fun as we do this process. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nate Goad. I'm a wealth specialist, just like you all out in the field, making things happen, conducting CNAs. And so today I want to share a little bit about the process that I take people through, kind of the framework that I view things. I've been teaching some of these to agents here locally, through a couple of boot camps. And so hopefully today I can equip you guys to go out there, have a lot of fun, but also impact a lot of lives. I remember what it was like sitting in your shoes, conducting my first CNA quite a while back, and remember some of the apprehension I had and the feelings that kind of go through your head. So hopefully this will be something that can help you go out there and impact a lot of lives positively. So we'll go ahead and jump into the CNA process. So when we start the process, I always think about it as kind of the prep before. And I love this picture because it kind of reminds me of how I see a lot of agents go into their first CNA. There's some nerves that are there, maybe a little bit of apprehension. What if I get asked a question? I don't know what the answer is. So I'm kind of here to take some of that pressure off for you guys. You know, the reality is when we're doing these trainings with people or taking people through the CNA process, really what we're doing is we're simply having a conversation with them. You know, the reality is if we're all network marketers, conversations and talking to people is something that we are okay at doing. And actually a lot of us are really good at doing. So like I said, I want to take some of the pressure off of each and every one of you and just realize that we're here to have a conversation with people. The other part around it too is have fun. And so, you know, that silly intro was there because I like to have fun, but also, you know, we want these processes of taking people through the CNA, the confidential needs analysis, to be enjoyable. The reality is people are going to give you 60, maybe 90, even 120 minutes of their time. So the last thing that we want to do is to sound like the clear eyes guy going through the CNA process. So have fun. The other part is to make it your own. For each and every one of you, there's going to be a learning process around this, but what I want to equip you is a framework and a way to kind of think through it, but I want you then to take it and to make it your own. Be authentic, be yourself. Each and every one of you will kind of develop a personality as far as the way that you do these CNAs. And that's okay. You know, by no means go and change the recipe that we're doing, but if you want to make some tweaks and maybe change the wording or even the flow, feel the freedom to do that. The last part too, like I said, is I want to take the pressure off. The reality is the people that we are getting in front of and we're sitting with, a lot of times they're not talking to other people. And so we're not competing for their business. Now, I don't want you guys to think that they've never had a conversation around insurance or investments or taxes. They have, but they're not sitting with someone like ourselves who is looking at their overall financial well-being and saying, how do I make things better for them? You know, the reality is a lot of these people, if we're not talking to them, they're not going to be talking to anyone. So ask yourself the question, are they better off because they have talked to you and gone through this process? You know, each and every one of us cares about these people. We want to do what's right. You know, we want to help them be in a better situation. So the answer is yes. If they talk with you or don't talk with anyone, they're going to be better off talking with you. You know, the reality is if we look at where you're at 5 years down the road, just in your financial literacy and understanding, you're going to be farther along down the path. But even today, you're able to help these people, just telling them what your story is, relaying the core services, how they've helped you, and just walking them through this process. The other part is materials. What kind of materials do you need for the appointment? And so when I go to the CNA, there's always two things that I'm bringing. One, CNA needs analysis sheet that is for me to take down the data to kind of keep me on pace as I go through the CNA. And the other part is the insurance sheet that is a teaching tool to help them with maybe some of the concepts that we're going to talk about. And so let me go ahead and show you where you can find those. Bear with me just 1 second as I go to the Trinot portal. All right, so this is once you log into the Trinot homepage. Here we are, and if you scroll down to step 3, the CNA training process, click on that. Under here, both of those are going to be there. The confidential needs analysis sheet And then this is the insurance sheet. It's called the Trinot Life Overview Sheet. So those are always two things that I am bringing for the client or for the client appointment to kind of talk through. And you can access both of those here on the Trinot Life page. All right, let me get back to my PowerPoint. So when I look at the CNA process, I kind of break it down into 5 different parts. The first part is, connecting with the client, getting to know them, building rapport. Rapport building is a part of it, but it's not just about rapport building. The reality is, here's a point where I'm looking at connecting with the client. I want to understand how they got hooked up with Trinot. Usually I'm going to spend about 5 minutes just digging in and kind of understanding who they are, how they got hooked up with Trinot. So some of the questions that I'll be asking with this is I always want to hear the story. How did they connect with Trinot? Maybe it was through a neighbor or a coworker or someone that they worked with formerly at a different company. The question I always follow up with is what attracted you to Trinot? There's so many different facets and different parts of Trinot. It's an amazing, amazing company, but for each person, there's going to be a different part that really connects with them. So maybe it's the financial literacy specifically around credit. Someone hasn't had great credit their whole life, so I want to understand better how to impact my credit score and put myself in a better situation. Maybe it's around, just getting some kind of a wealth plan, saying, I've always talked about retirement, I thought about retirement, but I never knew any practical steps to get there. It's going to be unique for every person. One of the things I love about Trinot is that I can say with integrity, if a person never makes a dime in earning in Trinot, just simply because they plugged into our core services, utilize some of the tax deductions that they get as a business owner, improve their credit, they're going to be in such a better situation simply by going through that process. And so, I love taking people through this just because it changes lives. The third part I want to ask them is what do they want to gain from Trinot? And so what I'm getting at here is I'm getting at 2 parts. One, what are they hoping to gain from Trinot regarding compensation? There's going to be some people that are going to come in and saying, I don't really know. I've never done anything like this before. So if I can make a couple $100 a month more or get my Jeep paid for, that would be a win for me. There's going to be others that are going to have that big vision and saying, you know what? I don't want to play around with this thing. I really want to hit the ground running. So my goal is to create $5,000 a month in revenue within the next 90 days. The other part around that is not just compensation, but also education. And so sometimes what attracts people to Trinot is I just want to get a better understanding of financial literacy and understand how do I put myself in a better situation. And so those 2 parts I'm always wanting to kind of craft the CNA around and help them at least get pointed in the right direction. If their goal is around compensation and that's a big thing that's driving them, it's my job to make sure that they understand how they get there in the comp plan. What do they need to get to that Jeep bonus? What do they need to earn that $25, $35, $45, $5,000 a month in compensation, kind of walk them through. But each of these is going to be unique because every person we're sitting across from is unique as well. So while we can take people through this process, each CNA is going to be a little bit different. I love this quote by Maya Angelou. And, I really want us to wrap our minds around the ability we have to impact people's lives through the CNA process. What she said is, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And so when you're sitting across a table from someone or you're doing a video chat with them, realize that you have the ability to really impact them positively, to make them feel hopeful, to make them feel like they have a future. They have a plan. They know what the future is going to look like instead of a lot of people not understanding or having concern. We have the ability to be those dealers in hope. So I want you guys to realize that you really have the ability to help people a lot through this process. So part 2, after going through that rapport building process and understanding their why as far as what they got hooked up with Trinot for and what they're wanting to build, we get kind of into the guts of the CNA. what I would say is the data gathering process, the more nitty gritty stuff. And so I always like kind of transition it too, even when I'm taking clients through this process. So, on that CNA sheet, which I'll pull up here in a minute, on the back, I'm going to be taking a lot of notes around what they're looking at creating, what they're looking at doing intranaut, some of their goals for it. And then on the front side, it's all about the data gathering. So like I said, even for myself, I will say some kind of transition like, hey, now we get into the fun stuff. We really get into the guts of, what your finances look like and see how we can make some improvements there. So let me go ahead and pull up that sheet. But the reality is this whole part, I want to do it in having a conversation. I don't want it to be a question and answer. I want to really engage them in this process, because the reality is they're going to just buy in and get a lot more excited about it. And that's really what we want, because this personal finances, it's not about the head knowledge. It's about the application of this knowledge, putting it into practice. A lot of people know what to do, but they don't do it. I always talk about weight loss is more akin to personal finances than just math. How many of us don't know how to lose weight? We all know how to do it, but it's the implementation, putting that into practice, that determines if we have success or not. So again, have a conversation around this process. This is where the majority of your time is going to be spent, is taking people through this process, gathering the data. And I'm always asking people, or I'm always thinking to myself when I'm taking people through this process, how can I help this person? How can I impact their lives positively? Again, if they sit with me, how are they going to leave better than when they first sat down? And so I'm always looking for one or two or three ideas or three ways that I can point out, oh my gosh, your interest rates are really high. Let's get your credit in check through our credit services and lower your interest rates. Or how do I develop a plan for this person? So I'm always thinking in the background, what is a few areas that I can help this person improve on? All right, let me go ahead and pull up that sheet and I'll kind of walk you through what my process is around the CNA. So this is the Trinot CNA form that's on there. Again, when we're going through this process, we just want to be having a conversation with people. I love the simplicity as far as how this form has been redesigned, just for us to kind of talk through this in a very, very simple way. Again, I'm having a conversation with people. So, if I don't know what they do, I'm going to just say, tell me about your occupation. And from there, I'm going to start gathering the data. Some of the key pieces of information I'm looking for is, what is their compensation? How is it made up? Is it all salary? Do they have some kind of compensation that's tied maybe to incentives or bonuses? How stable is that? And kind of get some of those details, but I'm going to do it in conversation. And so, I'm also going to explore a little bit about what they like and dislike about the job. Get people to open up and kind of have that conversation for both of them. Regarding the family, tell me about your family dynamic. How many kids are there? Do you plan on having more? Are they out of the house? Again, it's going to happen in a conversation. And then the part I love is about goals. The reality is a lot of people, when it comes to goals, they haven't taken the time to think through it. Life has just happened so much. And so this is really an opportunity for us to help them pause, to think, and to put some goals on paper. So there's a couple that's there. Sometimes it's regarding college funding for the kids, or they have a desire to travel. Maybe they want to start a business, or they have a goal with their business. Whatever it is, that's where we kind of capture it. We kind of split out retirement goals because that's a whole separate topic, where a lot of times we can put a framework and put a plan in place to help them accomplish that. And so that's the next part of it, is talking through the retirement goals. Always asking, okay, well, if you could retire, at what age would this happen? How much income would you need from all different sources? And that, again, is something a lot of people haven't thought through. And so, sometimes we're going to have to kind of help them think through this process and get to some of those answers. Talking through the income is the next part. Tax returns, this is a big part where we're looking at, okay, is there a way for us to help them be put in a better situation financially? So asking if they're getting money back on a pretty regular basis as far as tax returns, this is a big part. Through this whole process, like I said, I'm looking at, one, where can I help them in some area of their life be better than when they first sat down with me. And a lot of times too, I'm looking at from their finances, is there idea that I can give that's going to help them be in a better situation? You know, when it comes to their expenses, we just kind of list those out, and not everyone is going to have all of these, and so it's okay if it's kind of a ballpark, and maybe that's some of the homework you give them is to get all these things. I mean, the better the information, the better we're going to be able to plan. We're going to be able to help them. So going through their expenses is the next thing. Then we get into kind of their assets and retirement as far as what kind of plans do they have set up. Again, with these, they're not always going to know, oh, I know I have a 401k at my job. I don't know if it matches, or I don't know what that match looks like, and that's okay. Get as much information as you can, and then sometimes there's going to be other things that we're going to need to circle back on before we can kind of point them in the right direction one way or the other around some stuff. Part 6 goes into their debts or liabilities. Again, with this sort of stuff, the more detail that we can have, the better. And so I always like to kind of read the client as well. Sometimes the way I classify people when I'm sitting across from them is there's two types of people when it comes to finances. There's the nerd who kind of knows everything, is very in tune, knows all the numbers, likes that part, and then there's what's called a free spirit. You know, a lot of times they don't have any kind of framework around this. And that's okay. It's okay depending on what type of client. For someone who's more of a free spirit, I'm going to get as accurate information as possible. But I don't need them to tell me down to the penny as far as what their mortgage balance is. So like I said, for that client, I'm trying to read, you know, how detailed do I need to go? But the better quality of the information that you get, the better you're able to serve them and give them some great guidance. And so around this, you know, we're looking at their balances, their types of loans that they have, how much is owed. The other part I'm looking for how much are they paying in interest, because that's going to be an area a lot of times where I'm going to be able to help people lower those interest payments. And then part 7 is the core and the homework. And so at the end, I'm always going to give some people some homework, and so I'll take you through that process as well as far as how I do that. But this is kind of part 2, is gathering all this data. At the very bottom of this too, this is always a very important question to say, okay, well, are they saving anything today? And if not, what could they start as far as doing today? Going back to what I talked about again, usually when I'm starting with people and kind of opening them up and asking them those questions around, you know, how they got hooked up, which are not, on this page is where I'm going to be taking those notes. And so that's where I start, and then I kind of flip over to the front page. All right, let's get back to the PowerPoint here. So once you gather all this information, this is a very, very powerful part where they're able to see a lot of the benefit of Trinot in a very, very practical way as it applies to them. So this is where it kind of goes a lot of times from a conceptual to actually implementation for them. And so some of the things that I'm looking for as I'm going through that process regarding gathering the data is I'm looking for areas where the core can improve their financial picture. And so when I'm looking at their auto loan or their credit card and what the interest rate is, or their home mortgage, I want to see, are those interest rates high? And it's going to take a little bit of time. You're going to have to get some context around that as far as what's high and what's not. It's just going to take some time. But I'm looking at, do they have high interest rates? If they have high interest rates, you know, big thing I'm going to point to them is credit services. Going to make sure that they've got over to our credit services team what they need. I'm going to make sure they're going through that process as far as getting their credit cleaned up and their score raised so that we can then turn around and lower some of their interest rates. You know, I've seen crazy things going through this process. I've seen people that have bought autos, BMWs on a 22% interest rate. I mean, essentially buying a car on a credit card. Student loans that are very, very high. Credit cards that the interest rate is just exorbitant. And so, you know, the difference between having good credit and having bad credit when it comes to some of these, I mean, these can be the difference of hundreds of dollars a month in interest payments. And so here's something that we're going to move the needle. You know, regarding where most people are with their finances. We're a country that spends way more than what we bring in, so debt is a huge problem for a lot of people. And so get really good around credit services and what they can do. Find a testimony within your team or someone that you know that you can utilize, that you can kind of plant that vision, plant that seeds for, because again, it's all about them taking action, and there's going to be some part that they're going to have to do on their end for it to kind of continue to move through the process. Another part too, I'm looking for some questions around taxes. Do they have anyone who's helping them with their taxes currently? You know, if they're getting a big tax refund in the past, are they working with a CPA? Do they have any deductions that they're able to take? You know, TaxBot is such an amazing app. It has so much value simply by having a home-based business and taking advantage of the deductions that are out there. The reality is everyone should put money in their pocket just simply from a tax savings that they're going to be able to do by having a home-based business. So I'll plant those seeds again, make sure they have their TaxBot activated, make sure that they're utilizing their mileage tracker when they're doing stuff for business, telling them about using our tax services. You know, when it comes around to do their tax prep, we've got a team that can help them with that. And so planting that part. You know, for some people, a lot of this stuff, they're not really aware. And so OneView is a great tool for them. If I have someone who doesn't really know, you know, as far as what their spending habits are, I'm going to make sure that they're getting activated on OneView and that they're looking at it and seeing what the output is. Therefore, once we know, we can kind of plan around that. So a great tool for them. You know, asking them the question, have they ever had identity theft? Or if they haven't, do they know anyone who's had identity theft? Again, this is such a huge service for people just because identity theft is so rampant. But to unwind the process of when it happens is just a lot of time and work. You know, for people that have families or have kids, I'm going to ask the questions of have they gone through the process of setting up a will and other legal documents. You know, guardianship is a huge thing for anyone that has people that are still, or kids that are still at home. And so I'm going to plant the seeds around legal services to get someone who can understand their situation, who can look at kind of what they're wanting to do and make sure it's in writing. And again, for families, people that have kids at home, this is a huge thing that a lot of people don't do. So there's guardianship regarding a will. You know, another part too is if something happens to them and there's decisions that have to be made on their health, have they put their wishes in writing through a healthcare surrogate? Or again, if they're incapacitated, do they have someone who can step in and go to bat for them regarding their financial accounts and make decisions around that through a power of attorney? So we've got such great core services. What I'm doing through this process is I'm looking for maybe 2 or 3 things that our core services can move the needle on for them and really show them, hey, you know, there's so much value here when they put it into practice. So that's part 3, is demonstrating the core as far as how it can help them. Part 4 would be talking through a wealth plan and illustrating. And so, you know, for this, I'm going to use our insurance sheet to talk through kind of what our process is and talk through a wealth plan and some of the benefits. Let me go ahead and pull that up so I can kind of walk you through how I utilize that sheet. And I'll pause here and just kind of say too, the majority of the time I'll take people through this process start to finish in one appointment. Sometimes there's not the information that you need, and so you'll have to break it up into 2 or 3 appointments. That's okay. For new agents, a lot of times I'm telling them, you know, once they've shadowed or once they've seen the process, they're going out and they're doing CNAs now on their own. I'm telling them to go out there and to do that step 1 of the data gathering process, to get the information, to go through that process where they understand what this client is looking at doing. And then from that point, they're going to set a second appointment after they've had some time to digest it, probably work with someone in their upline or another agent to say, let's kind of talk through the scenario, see if you can kind of help me be pointed in the right direction. It's okay to break it up into 2 or 3 appointments. Sometimes too, from a timing perspective, that person may only have an hour. And so you're not going to get through this start to finish if that's the case. So it's okay if you have to break it up into 2 to 3 appointments. So this is the insurance sheet that we utilize. And a lot of times what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about insurance and how it's a foundation it's a foundation to financial planning. And so I'll give the analogy of building a house. What if you were to go out there and try to put the roof on before you had that foundation, those walls in place? How would that work? Insurance is a great way for us to have that foundation in place. I'm going to talk through a little bit of the different types of insurance. If we have someone who is younger, they've got some options. Any client has some options, but they're going to have some different options regarding temporary insurance through a term or some kind of permanent insurance. And again, the way I kind of walk people through this process is a lot of times we're utilizing permanent insurance because there's a lot of benefits that other products don't have. And so I'm going to talk through protection outside of a temporary period, 10 or 15 to 20 years. They can have protection that will go for as long as they need it. Also, the ability to save and capture some growth within there. I'm going to talk about the ability to access those funds through living benefits. And we're going to have some other separate training as far as how we take people through that process, how we create illustrations. But I'm going to touch on a few of those here. The other part I love about our index product is going back to people having success or failure when it comes to their finances. A lot of times it's not the knowledge, it's the implementation. So one of the biggest things I see regarding stopping people from doing the right things is just fear. If you look at what happened in 2008, if you look at the market and how it dropped, there's a lot of fear around doing anything where there's risk. So there's a correlation between taking risk and getting return. So, you may find some kind of vehicles where there's no risk. However, there's no upside as well. And so people have to be willing to take some kind of risk in order to get some kind of return. There's scars that people have experienced from going through 2008. If you look at where the markets are at today, they're at all-time highs. So now there's concerns. Okay, well, what if we go back through that? And so that fear is what is keeping a lot of people from actually implementing and doing something that's going to help them be in a better situation financially. The Index Universal Life, in my opinion, is one of the best vehicles to help people still get great returns, cover the permanent insurance needs that they have, but to take away that fear. This graphic here illustrates the difference between the way I explain it, riding the roller coaster all the way up and then all the way back down. You get the full returns, but you also take the full amount of risk versus our indexing strategy where we put that floor on and they can still get those higher returns, 13, 14, 15% or greater. It's a great illustration to kind of talk people through and say, what if we were able to remove the risk regarding that downside of your account? How would that make you feel? So I'll kind of talk through this a little bit to educate them as far as why we're going to utilize insurance a lot of times as a vehicle, as a starting point. And this isn't going to be a fit for every client, so don't feel like it's a one size fits all. But the reality is, if you look at just statistically and how many people have addressed this need that they have, there's a lot of people that have that need. And so until someone is at the point where they have enough assets, if they pass away, that their significant other, their family would be self-insured, their earning potential, what they're making from their job is one of their biggest assets that they have. Specifically for someone who's in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, you think about how much money they're going to earn before they retire. It is a big number. So we want to make sure that we're protecting clients, we're protecting families on that front. And so I know we're in the process of kind of revisiting this sheet and making some tweaks around how we talk through that. But this is what I utilize as far as taking people through that process, crafting an illustration for them, and then kind of talking through that as well. All right, let me get back to my PowerPoint here. There's my little guy again. Technical difficulties, bear with me. Again, don't get hung up on this part. As you get more comfortable with this process, you're going to kind of find a way in a story that works as far as how you take people through. I don't want it to be intimidating for you. I want it to be a tool that you can utilize when you're going through this. It's about creating vision for people. And so for those who don't have a plan in place or haven't started anything, it's kind of painting that vision as far as putting money aside, getting it to work in the right places and what that's going to create for them and their family. It's about casting that vision. But the second part about it is getting them started. And so, maybe they're not at the point where they can contribute significant funds to that plan. Maybe they've got $50 or $100 to start putting it away. You got to get them started somewhere. And so you've got to have the conviction that it's not about leaving this meeting being perfect, but it's about leaving in a better situation than when they came. And so the way I always talk about it, it's about building a muscle. You've got to start somewhere. I love this thing. Because again, like I said, it's more akin to weight loss, to exercise, than it is just to math. Getting people started, if you've got 300 pounds to lose, the reality is you don't lose it all in a week or a month or a year. It's a process of starting to do the right things. The same thing is the same parallel with someone's personal finances. They're going to have to take baby steps in order to get there, but our job is to get them taking steps in the right direction. So just have that conviction that people need to start with something. So even if it's small, get them started. And the last part that I break this down is I want to give them some homework and some next steps. Again, it's about taking this head knowledge and for them to implement it. The reality is that we're just there kind of coaching them. We're wealth coaches to help them through that process, but we can't do it for them. Similar to a trainer in the gym, he can't do the reps for you. You got to do it yourself, but he can give you some guidance around technique. He can motivate you. That's our job as well. And so some practical things that I'm always looking at doing when I'm working with a client is I want to give them 2 or 3 homework items to work on. A lot of times when you're sitting down with people, there's lots and lots of things where you can see improvement. But what we don't want to do is we don't want to overwhelm people, because being overwhelmed leads to doing nothing. And that's exactly the opposite of what we want people to do. We want them to take action on something. And so maybe there's a couple of items that they need to follow up around. Maybe it's around a 401k plan or some type of insurance policy that they already have. I want them to track down and get me that data so that we can help them kind of walk through it. It could also be something with the core. Maybe they haven't fully gone through the process to get their credit services going, and so maybe there's a couple of pieces of information that's needed. That's going to be some homework for them. So again, I'm looking at giving them maybe 2 or 3 different items for them to complete. I don't want to overwhelm them. And how I prioritize this is, one, if they tell me something specific that's very important to them, like I want to have a plan in place for retirement, I want to start contributing, that's going to be one of the things that I'm going to work towards. If they don't have anything like that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at from the prioritization standpoint and just say, okay, well, if they get this thing, if they start here, what's going to move the needle the most in their lives? What's going to have the biggest impact? And that's where I'm going to start. Like I said, the top 2 or 3 items. So it could be, like I said, it could be their credit. If it's a family, it could be simply having the conversation with our legal services to start that conversation about guardianship and what happens, God forbid, something happens to them and their family. But 2 to 3 things is what I'm gonna give them regarding some homework for them to kind of go and implement. And then another part is too, you want to keep in touch. We want to talk through the next steps. If you're leaving and another meeting is needed, get your calendar out right then while they're still engaged, while they're still excited about what you're doing, and schedule that meeting then and there. Get it on paper. Also talk through what next steps are. If there's a couple of items that you need them to track down before you can kind of finalize and get the process complete, equip them to say, okay, we'll go out and get those and let's circle back. Can you get those to me by Friday? We want commitment from people because life happens, it gets busy, it's out of sight, out of mind. So again, action is the biggest thing that we need to get people to take when it comes to this stuff. There's also on that CNA sheet, there's a spot that asks for referrals. And so this is a great time just asking a simple question like, did you find value in this process? People are going to be so excited when they've gone through this process because most people have never been through anything similar. And so there's such great value that we're able to create. They'll be excited around that. And so getting a couple of people or names that, maybe even they reach out to a friend and say, hey, you know what, Nate or Shani or Veronica took me through this process. It was amazing. You need to sit down and have a conversation because I know they can help you as well. Great time to ask for referrals. once you kind of have completed and created a lot of value for them around what we're doing. And I'll leave all of you guys with this quote, because I think it's very, very poignant for kind of what we're doing. It's by Albert Einstein. It says, "A ship is always safe at shore, but that's not what it was built for." And so, the way I kind of look at this is how it relates to you as a CNA, as a well specialist going out there and doing CNAs. It's safe until you get out there and you start doing it. And so I would encourage each and every one of you, it's about taking action personally, going out there and doing these CNAs. The reality is the only way that you're going to learn is by doing it. So get out there, help a lot of people, have a lot of fun, impact lives for the positive. There's going to be, apprehensions that you have. If there's questions that come up that you don't know the answer, it's okay. One of the best things that I teach people to say is, "That's a great question." One of the things I love about Trinot is that we've got a whole team of people that can help me walk through this. I want to talk through it with a couple of my other well specialists is to make sure that we're pointing you in the right direction. So never feel like you have to answer a question on the spot. If there's something you don't know, it's okay. Like I said, we've got a great team of people in the home office as far as people that can support you with cases that you're working on, with training that you need. Utilize them, but don't feel like because you don't have all the answers, you can't go out there and do it. Again, coming back to the start, where we started at, are these people going to be better off sitting with you instead of sitting with anyone or with no one? I'm sorry. And the answer is always going to be yes. So get out there. As Jeremy Diebel would say, create a mess. We're going to help you guys with it. I look forward to seeing your guys' success and celebrating it with you. Thank you for tuning into this time. Hopefully it was beneficial, and have a great day.